Sometimes something truly amazing happens here at Book Passage. Young Niccolo Mazza has always loved to read and write, and he worked with our very own Amanda Conrad, who mentors young writers. He wrote and published his book, The Forgotten Sword. I cannot tell you how many times I have talked to hopeful authors who've been working on their book for 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, 40 years. As all writers will tell you, writing is hard, lonely work. And one of the hardest parts is finishing a book. Niccolo has accomplished all that and more with this amazing work at a ripe old age of 15. And that is truly amazing. He is a sophomore at SI, and he discovered his passion for writing in the 5th grade and has delighted in reading for as long as he can remember. In addition to writing, Niccolo competes in both water polo and swimming. He is a member of his high school jazz band and has been playing the drums since age 4. This gentleman can do it all. He is an amazing accomplishment and a huge role model. We are so proud of him here at Book Passage. We are thrilled to celebrate, promote, and honor this incredible book by a very inspiring author. So please join me in welcoming a special young person who I know can teach us old people a great deal. Welcome, Nico Mazza.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And first of all, I'd like to thank Book Passage for hosting this event. They've been an incredible asset in this journey, and I'm truly grateful for all they've done for me. So, I'm going to start off. I'll read a quick excerpt from my book, the prologue. Thank you. I'll start by reading an excerpt from my book, the prologue, and then I'll talk a little bit about my journey, nothing too long, and then we'll open it up to Q&A for all of you guys. "13 years ago, Miss Eleanor, the Western Town librarian, recognized the rhythm of the horses' hooves before she even saw it coming. She'd been dwelling in her back room when ever so slightly a light gallop could be heard. She had exited into the main library, noticing some customers looking in wonder outside, as a large hazel horse thundered up to the library. Eleanor hurried outside as a man in a simple tunic, cape, and sheathed sword on his belt leapt off his horse and raced towards her, holding a scroll in his hand. 'Maximus,' she exclaimed, 'what in the name of Elysix is going on? Are you all right? Is Marlton okay? What about Cornus?' The man was gasping. However, that did not stop him from answering her. 'No, not okay. Urgent Primaire Cornus.' Maximus handed over the scroll. Eleanor ignored the gaping townsfolk as she unfurled the scroll, her hands shaking. What had happened? She didn't want to press Maximus, as the man was still wheezing. However, she felt bile rising in her throat, and she began to read the scroll. 'Eleanor, there is not much time. You need to know this. The enemy has struck. We are being invaded by King Jada, a king from the south, leading his Titan army. I don't know what he's up to, but I have many reports of children being stolen away from the Titans. Infants, no more than a year old. I don't know what he's doing with them, but it can't be good. It makes no sense. I must get this letter to you before Shaddad takes the town. I know you were looking into his attacks, so I trust and hope you know more about this than me. And thank you for sending Maximus. He is a good man. You choose your friends well. I'm sure he will get this to you. Be safe until I see you again, Mayor Cornus.' Eleanor stared, shocked. Marlton, attacked, and by King Shaddad? She looked at Maximus. Is everyone all right? Did Cornus get away? Her friend seemed to have gained some of his breath back. No, he said sadly. You told me to deliver this to you at all costs. Right when I left the town, his tower burst into flames. The Titans had been throwing torches and flaming arrows at it, and he was inside. Eleanor felt a tear slide down her cheek. How? She would never see him again, one of her dearest friends, gone. She looked at Maximus, who seemed completely sick. Here, come inside. I'll grab you some water. The two entered the library, and Eleanor quickly reached for some water that was sitting on her desk in the back room. However, as she handed him the glass, a scroll that she had been examining earlier caught her eye. And Eleanor suddenly wobbled and was only just caught by Maximus as a horrible realization entered her head. Hey, careful, Maximus said. Maybe you need this water more than I do. Eleanor ignored him, picked up the scroll, and stared at it, eyes wide. Is everything okay? Once again, she ignored her friend, and instead, she traced her finger along the scroll, which was in fact a map of the continent, Lysix. Little dots marked different kingdoms and towns. However, 7 gold stars were placed on the map across the continent, marking very specific kingdoms and towns. Eleanor had plotted them herself. 6 of them were crossed out with large X's. These 6 locations with the X's had been attacked in the past year. And Marlton was the 7th untouched town, except now it was no longer untouched. Perhaps Chida was after something much bigger than she had previously thought. Could it be possible? No, but there was so much evidence. Eventually she couldn't deny it. Chida was after the spectacular swordsman. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so that was the prologue. Now I'll talk a little bit about my journey, and then, like I said, we'll open it up to Q&A. Okay, so to start off, I've always been an avid reader. For those of you who know me well, I read a lot, and I still try to read as much as I can. I don't have as much time as I'd like anymore, but I do what I can. And specifically in 5th grade was when I read a lot of the books that I still love. They're still my favorite series and novels today. I'd be really shocked if anyone in this room has not heard of Harry Potter. And then a lot of you my age have probably read Rick Riordan's books, Percy Jackson and the Greek mythology sort of stuff. And then there's also this other author named Brandon Mull, who has written series called Beyonders, Fablehaven, and 5 Kingdoms, and those have been my favorite series as well. And so all of that, I've always been a fan of fantasy when I was younger. All of that combined made me want to try writing myself. So in December of 2016, I was in 5th grade. I was about to turn 11, and that's when I started writing this book that you see here. And I'll be honest, I had no idea what I was doing. I was in 5th grade. I was very young, and I had no end in sight. So it was really a stream of consciousness. I'd sit down at my computer and just write all the time. My parents would be like, what is he doing in his room? Why does he have the door closed? And that went on for about 3/4 of a year. So summer going into 6th grade is when I finished the first draft. And after that 2 years, I continued to write. I wrote a book 2 and a book 3 draft for this, and when I was fall of my 8th grade year, 2019, I started going back to these old works, and when I looked at this book, I said it's kind of a shame this is sitting in here and it's not out in the world, and that's when editing and publishing first popped into my mind. And so I talked to my parents, and they were willing to support me in it. I'm super grateful for everything that they've done. And we came to Book Passage to start it off and to find an editor. And I started by talking to this woman named Pamela Livingston. She's the publisher of a small publishing company called Goose Bottom Books. And she recommended Amanda Conran, who is here right now. And I'll get into a little more of the editing process here, but I just want to give her a round of applause because she's been such an amazing asset in my entire journey. That editing took a 1.5 years plus. It was the largest section, I'd say, of this whole project, and she helped me completely revamp and reform this novel from my 5th grade writing skills, which I'm sorry to say we're not the greatest. And I'd say the most important thing I learned working with her, though, was to not be afraid to change my writing throughout that process. And she would tell me stories of adult authors who she'd worked with who would write a first draft and understandably be attached to those characters and those scenes that they would write, and they wouldn't exactly want to change everything. And so with that in mind, I try to keep an open mind, and by doing so, I think it was a huge help in how this book turned out. I changed everything that I changed has made this book so much better than it once was, and I'm truly grateful that she taught me that lesson. So the editing process wrapped out this past December in 2021, and that's when I started looking towards the next step, which was to get a cover design company and then eventually publish. And so we settled at the Monza. They did an amazing job. They taught me that a simple cover usually gets the job done. I originally had a scene in mind, but I think seeing this now, it works much better. They also did the interior formatting, and there you go. And that led us to March of this year, which is when I self-published, and I went with a company called Ingram Spark. They did a great job. They got it out in a month. It was released on April 10th, and here we are 2 months later. And for those of you that don't know, this is going to be a trilogy, and I've already started working on book 2. But I've learned so much throughout this journey, and I'm so proud of where it's at, and I've really been looking forward to and enjoying applying these new skills that I've learned to writing the second book and make a more polished product, more enjoyable product for all of you guys. So thank you guys all for coming. I truly appreciate all the support you guys have shown me on this journey. And there you are. Now we're opening it up to Q&A.
Okay, I'm sorry, our we're having technical issues, so I apologize for that. So Nicola is just gonna speak, he's gonna answer really loudly. So you can ask your question, you can stand up and ask your question and kind of shout. That'd be great.
Just raise your hand and I'll call on you guys.
When's the movie?
Hopefully soon, but I don't have any takers yet. But
I should read it first, you think?
yeah. You know, like you do with Harry Potter, you read the books and then you see the movie. You see how much better the book is, right?
Do you use word processor, or do you write it longhand?
I use word processor. Yeah, I find it easier to type. Just it's faster, and I just like it. And I've grown up in the digital age, so
Yeah.
it's kind of my thing.
Do you ever come up with ideas in the middle of the night, like from your dreams? And do you, like, you find yourself like waking up and thinking, oh, that would be a really good idea, and then write stuff down?
Sometimes it's rare. I don't usually write it down. I kind of store it all up in here, and then I think if it's important enough that I will use it, I will remember it. So that's kind of how I go by. If I forget it, it's fine. But if I remember it, then I will maybe start to think about using that in another book or whatever, wherever it fits.
Nicola, when do you find the time to write? I know how busy you are. When do you find the time? And then also, do you try to keep it on a regular schedule where you're doing, Saturday morning from 8 to 10 or something like that?
Yeah, that's another thing that I've learned. I'm gonna try, and when I start my junior year, I'm gonna try and work it into the weekends a little bit more. But I used a lot of like summer vacation, winter break, spring break, all the breaks and days off that I have. I really just crank out a bunch of writing during that time. it started developing as I was writing, and then as I continued writing more, it started developing much faster. So by the time I was in the middle, I had an idea for the rest of the book and the next book. So it's kind of exponential in the way it grows. But that was how my 5th grade mind was working.
So do you already know the characters you want to develop? Do you storyboard it all? How do you, you just let it be an organic process? Like,
Yeah, I also have other ideas for other series now that I'm going to outline more. This, like I said, I just started, so it's a special case, I guess you could say. It's a learning process. I'm gonna start applying new ways to write in the future, but
Cool.
it just kind of rolled with it for this one.
Nicola, to piggyback off of that, for characters, you said the editing process was the biggest part of this. Were any characters removed? And are you gonna maybe put them back in for your or have you thought about that?
There were characters removed just because they weren't performing the right, like, they weren't meaty enough to stay in there, and they were just kind of excess, so I thought I could do without this. It's, Game of Thrones has like 50 million characters, and you can't remember half of their names, and if that's the way you want to write, that's totally fine. I just don't prefer that style. I'd rather know my characters and have like meaty personalities for all of them.
Do any of your characters, are they related to people that you know now? Is that how you get them?
I mean, I'm not specifically pulling from them, but I'm sure there are definitely, and I've noticed too, there are qualities where I see them in other people that I interact. I mean, that's how you create characters. You interact with real people, and that's how you create a character. You base it off someone you know, or a mixture of character traits from people you know.
Did you write this entire book made up, or did some of it relate to your life?
I couldn't hear that one.
She just asked if I wrote it completely made up, or if some of it related to the experiences of my life. It was a lot of stuff that was coming out of my imagination, but there are, I don't know, like the journey, like the mental journey, I'd say, that the character goes on relates to certain parts of journeys that have been in my life. That's kind of how you can piece it together. And then you throw it in a fantasy world and put swords and dragons and all that fun stuff to make it interesting.
Hey, Nicola, I think it's amazing what you've done.
Thank you.
Being one of my son's classmates at SI, and I know how busy you are with jazz and everything else. Writing is such an accomplishment at such a young age. Would you say that some of the stuff came from old comics like Conan the Barbarian and stuff like that? Did that inspire you at all?
I would say other works for sure. Like I said, Harry Potter. I'm a big fan of that. I've read like the books 5 times. I've seen the movies 5 times. It's ridiculous. And then the other books that I listed that I read when I was young, I wouldn't say comics specifically, but definitely other works I've taken inspiration from and melded it into a new product.
Is this your dream going forward, going to college, or are you gonna accomplish more things and this is just your hobby on the side?
No, I'd say this is the main thing, and it's a bummer because it's difficult to make a living off writing, and you have to hit it big. Like for every one J.K. Rowling, there's millions of other writers who are like me and have a small book starting off. But hopefully I'll find something to make a living on the side. But hopefully I'll keep working with this, and eventually something good will befall me.
Yes.